I was in like these dark spots, of just like all the stuff they want to put us in. And it took a long time to get out of that. I just see things so differently now, and I want to try to share as many things as I can so that other people don't have to go through the same thing.
Dr. Zelenko became a household name when he developed his world-famous Zelenko protocol. To make sure that everybody had access to his immune-boosting formula, he created Z-Stack, my family's immune-boosting supplement of choice. Along with Z-Detox, Z-Flu, and Z-Shield, Z-Stack has helped countless families stay healthy and protected. With every purchase of Dr. Zelenko's products, you also support the Zelenko Freedom Foundation in their tireless work to promote and reinstate medical freedom for all. Click the link down below, use coupon code INSPIRE to save, and protect your family today. Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another inspired conversation. I'm really excited about this one. We've been looking forward to having him on. He's been all over Instagram and YouTube and the other platforms teaching people amazing things, lost arts, lost knowledge, hidden knowledge. And that's what we're going to talk about today with Matt Roeske, from the founder of Cultivate Elevate. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Oh man, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you on. We've been, my wife and I have an Instagram messaging thing going. So, she'll send me the best reels, and it's always gardening. It's always about the stuff that you talk about. And so we were so excited you agreed to come on. And I have to say thank you first and foremost, because my wife, Christine, found out about Electroculture mainly through you. She implemented it in our garden this year, and the results are absolutely amazing. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So my first question is, how did you discover this hidden knowledge that's been around for a long time, but it's been hidden from us? And what got you started on this whole journey?
So I got into learning about electroculture because I had an Akashic reading in 2020. And the lady who I spoke to, she was 2,000 miles away. She told me my entire life, my whole life story, every single thing about it, and she basically said, at the end of it, I want you to look into crop circles. And I said, I don't know what to do with that information. She goes, you'll just know what to do. You'll figure it out. Just go and look at them and just start looking them up online from 2000, let's say 4 till now. So till 2020 at that time, or 2019-ish. So, she said that, and I said, okay. So I started looking into it, and I started looking at them. And as I started to look at them, they resonated with a lot of different things related to pyramids, related to sacred geometry. There was things where they even showed, maybe how these were designed, what is designing them. Is Mother Earth, producing these? That's kind of my theory on it. The Mother Earth is communicating with us. That's where these designs are coming from. But with that, I started getting into that. And then as I got into that, I got into a lot of work with Mary Hardy and Pyramid Energy, and understanding all the work that she's done, and them building pyramids up in Michigan and helping their children with pyramids and healing with pyramids. Their children were having attention disorders, and they were solving them with putting them in a pyramid. And they also noticed that plant growth increased everything around the pyramid. So as I was getting into that, I stumbled upon a bunch of work with Justin Cristo Flo, George Lakhovsky, and then Victor Schauberger. And Victor Schauberger's work pretty much kind of blew me away, right, out of all the things in which I was learning, because Victor was from Austria. He lived in the forest. He understood nature. He understood if we work with nature, we'll go with nature. If we go against nature, nature will destroy us. Very, very simple man, and very connected. And as I got into his work, he was a big one with copper and bronze and brass and all these beautiful materials. He understood the resonance. He understood how things spiral and vortex, and how you can structure water with just vortexing it. He understood everything because he basically sat in nature and watched it, and he understood that, for example, how fish do not swim up the stream. They levitate. They create vortices while their fins are going, and they levitate up the stream. So he basically was getting into all this. And as I was getting into all of his books, I pretty much bought and got all of his books. And I just started reading every single one because each one connected more dots of things. And I remember I got to a point in one of his books in which he talked about the materials going into our earth are determining how much food we are going to produce. And what he noticed was when people were using iron in their soil, right? And all these farmers who were using iron, all of these tools related to iron, he noticed that their soil started to get very clumpy. It started to be hard to work with. They had to use 2 to 3 times the water. He noticed that the plant growth wasn't as good. He also noticed there was more slugs, right? Because the slugs are coming around from all the rust and the decay from the iron. And he thought, this is not a great idea, and we should be doing something else. So he saw a couple different places where they didn't use iron. They just used wood at that time, actually, too. And they were getting great results. And what he did was he created this beautiful copper brass plow that would basically mimic the way that a shark cuts through the water so that it would cut through the earth perfectly. And he noticed tremendous increase in yields. Then he started creating copper tools, and he started giving them to different farmers, and he noticed, once again, tremendous yields and increases and all these things. And so he proposed all this to the Bulgarian government at that time, and they basically shot it down. They shot it down and said, we can't have the farmers doing this. This is going to get rid of my kickback, right? So we follow it back to the money. But basically they were getting kickbacks from the fertilizer companies and from the pesticide companies. And this is just in the time of 1940s to 1950s when chemical farming got very, very large. So when we look at that, he basically, wanted to continue with this. And they said, well, if you want, we can give you money, but, we can't do your plans. So what they did was he said, I didn't want to be a part of that. And he basically said, I'm going to do my own thing. So what they did was they put out a public broadcast on the newspaper and the radio about if you use copper tools inside your soil, you'll yield too much food and not make enough money. And so,
Matt, repeat that, please. Say that again, please. This is after World War II. We're rebuilding a whole continent. We're rebuilding everything. And what are they saying?
So if you use copper tools in your soil, you will yield too much food and not make enough money, right? And this was told to all the farmers. So at the time, when the farmers were dependent on that money supply, right, for their food, they decided, well, then I'm not going to do that because I can't risk that, right? We can't risk losing a season and not having food. We're not going to mess with any of that. So instantaneously, Victor Schauberger's work on all of this related to copper and all of the benefits and those things was all lost, right? And so when I read that one point in that book, I thought, I'm going to try this out, right? I'm going to try using some copper. I'm going to try making some antennas. I'm going to test it out, right? I want to see what happens. So what I did was I took a piece of wood and I wrapped it with copper and I just put it in my planter pot out on the balcony. And my moringa tree pretty much started, going crazy. And it's in a planter pot. So I'm on the third floor. I'm on a balcony. I'm not connected to the earth. There's tap water going into the plant, right? I went with just what everybody is doing, the traditional way. And basically what I noticed was instead of getting 6-inch moringa pods on my moringa when it fruited, right, I got 14 to 22-inch moringa pods. And they were the size of my arm, right? So then I thought, okay, now everybody, we need to put this out here. Like I've tested it, I've tried it, I want to put it out there for others to try. And then so I made one video, and it was me just putting the antenna into the soil and then showing it. And then that video pretty much hit 1 million views, which was crazy, and people started trying it. And now to this day, it's just going all over, right? And people testing different things, using different types of materials. But what the whole reason I basically did all this and started to put this thing out there is because we were facing these, food shortages of 2020, 2021, and 2022. And a lot of those shortages, just so people know, the food was being held in warehouses to make it look like the food was not there. All the big corporations admitted to that. That's why they started to have a sale in about 2023. They tried to sell everything off because they were actually holding all of this. And I put a video up on that as well, too. But with that, we were having all these food shortages, and it's like there's no solutions. And then I thought, well, instead of using the traditional pesticides and chemicals and all this chemical farming that we're using, why don't we just use Mother Earth's energy, right? And that's what Victor Schauberger was all about. That's what George Lakhovsky was about. Justin Christo Flo, all these people, even if you go back into Antoine Mesmer and all of his work as well, use the energy that's all around us and we can heal and uplift everything. If we go against that and we spray all these poisons and toxins and pesticides onto our plants and our land, we're just poisoning ourselves, right? Like, and then we're going to eat that food and poison our body. So it doesn't make any sense. So that's pretty much the short story of how I got into electroculture and started getting into this rabbit hole.
I love it. I also love that, I know you and I and a lot of people in our community are not technology oriented people. We use it at this period in time, but really to inspire people to connect back to nature. So I love how technology is helping you to do that and reaching so many people. We're also working closely and are great friends with Jim Gale of Food Forest Abundance, whom you know as well. And, he has taught us that the permaculture model, on average, increases the yield by 30% as compared to the toxic model of pesticides, monocrops, and all of that. In terms of numbers, because right now we only have the empirical experience of the food just growing much faster. It looks much healthier, just beautiful. In terms of numbers and stats, do you have any numbers as to how much? Let's take the permaculture model. You already increased by 30%. Now you add electroculture, which is so simple. We just took bamboo sticks, we put the copper wire around it the way you describe it in your videos, and Christine put it in the ground next to every plant. That's what we did. What are your numbers that you have on that?
So what I've seen is people getting about double or triple the size of their leaves, right? And then I've also seen them getting 2 to 3 times the amount of fruit that they used to get. I've seen people also getting fruit, for example, 3 times in 3 months, right? So that I think is a really big one, right? A lot of people were telling me about how they've had cabbage. For example, I had a lady who was she was in Florida. She normally gets a 6 pound cabbage in April. She got a 12.5 pound cabbage in the beginning of April, so before the timeline in which she normally did. So I've seen that. I've seen the leaves. My buddy just sent me the pictures of his potato plant. The leaves are bigger than his hand, and there's so much. It's basically made me realize that we have no idea how large food can be, right? Like we've only been sold a certain image and certain look and certain things. And, I've even seen, which I think is really fascinating, and it relates to this topic as well, of plants coming back to life, which people have believed that they were gone, right? So then the real question is what is the true potential, right? If we have plants also coming back to life and we're getting double the size or 3 times the size or whatever it may be, right? What is the true potential of how large things can be? And so basically for numbers wise, I've just seen, a lot of just everything much bigger. Even stalks. I had a lady, she's in Ireland with her garlic. Her stalks of garlic are 2 to 3 times the size and the thickness compared to the ones in which without electroculture. So then just think of the bulb, right? If the stalk is larger, the bulb is going to be larger. So you're going to get more garlic. So it's wild when you get into this. And then if we take it to the animal spectrum, there was a book I was reading from the 1800s where they talked about they used different types of electroculture techniques to increase wool production in America, because America used to be one of the largest producers of wool at that time, and they used these antennas, and the wool of the sheep at that time was 2 times as thick. So then if you think about it with animals, right, what's the potential with animals? And then I had another lady who she had quails, and they were laying their eggs. She put some antennas next to their little quail coop, and she started getting 2 times the amount of eggs. So then the question is how much more can we have on every spectrum of our food supply, and without harming anything, without doing anything different, just enhancing what's already there, instead of having to do this whole weird situation that we've seen with our food supply, and like you said, with pesticides and chemicals and all the other stuff.
Matt, do you think, studying all of this, and of course the question is how, what about humans? And that's the second question. The first part of this question is, do you think that we're actually using electroculture? Are we actually enhancing something, or are we restoring it to its true natural potential the way it was way back when?
So what's interesting is there's a book in German. My buddy was just telling me about, and this relates to that topic. And I'll have to get the book for you. But basically, this guy created a device where he would take a seed, for example, place it in there, and it would go back to its primal, like the original primal genes, right? And what he noticed was instead of a corn stalk having just one stalk, right, it had five stalks, and each one was much larger and absolutely gigantic. And he showed this with fish too. Instead of having just a small fish with a little jaw, these fish had gigantic jaws, right, and were much bigger. So now the question is, if we use this with healing us or this type of technology, yeah, we could use it to heal us. We can use it to heal humanity. And then as for what we're doing, I think we're really tapping into what used to be, right? Because even when we look at, for example, old world buildings such as cathedrals, right? They used to have antennas all over the place. They were everywhere on top of there. There were thousands of these lightning rods, as we were told, but thousands of those all over the place. So then the question is how much was that enhancing, and then how much was being tapped into? Because when we go up in the air, right, up into the atmosphere, there's atmospheric electricity. There's all this energy that's all around there that's all free. And with doing electroculture, we're tapping into that. And that's why the taller you go up, the more you start to tap in. So when it comes to it, what I think is happening is we've been bombarded with frequencies over the last 100 years since the rollout of the radio, right? That's kind of when it started. Power lines and radio in the 1900s and 1880s. We've been
They
bombarded.
always coincide with mass sickness, right?
Yes, yes, always. Yes, people started experiencing, flu-like symptoms from the rollout of the radio. And that was because the influence of the atmosphere or the stars was causing that, but it was really the radio.
Influenza.
Yes.
It's in the name.
Yes. And so that was pulsing all those signals. Now, the real question is what was that doing to plant life, right? What was that doing to birds, insects, bees, pollinators, all of that? So what we're doing is, as we're doing electroculture and we're placing these antennas and we're working with different quartz and lodestones and all these different beautiful things, basalt as well, we're restoring what used to be there. And I say that because a lot of people start getting more bees, more pollinators, more hummingbirds, all these beautiful, beautiful creatures. And when we look at that, it's like something's going on because we still have the same amount of frequencies. There's still the same amount of these towers all over the place, right? But something is changing in which the animals are coming. And animals pick up on that energy. So I see it as there's like almost like it's like a vortex, it's just spiraling that whole time. And now what's starting to happen is those insects and animals are starting to pick up on that. And because it's a healing frequency too, for not only the plants and the people living there as well, but everything wants to come, right? Because if you think about it, with the cathedrals and all those antennas and all the pipe organs that used to be in there, imagine the healing frequencies from that playing or those bells ringing, right? So now if we implement the two, electroculture and sound healing, and these things, we could be doing stuff on a whole scale we just couldn't fathom. And also because we haven't been told this information, so that we just have a perception that, corn does this and wheat does this and these things do that. But it's like, maybe it's much more than that. And we really should be questioning what we've been told and sold.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I believe you're tapping into, like you say, you're tapping into fundamental knowledge and wisdom here. And in our culture, where it's a sickness that we need to constantly change, move forward. We're getting more artificial, we're getting more technological. It's a technocracy, AI, all of that. Those who are brave enough, we look way, way back and see, hold on, we've already been, at this really wonderful state of culture. Very, very long time ago, we had all of this. When you mentioned the cathedrals, you also notice in most of those old world cathedrals, the doorways are so huge that you and I couldn't even reach the handle. I mean, who were they built for, right? So these are all these questions that you and I have, and we're exploring these answers, and you're doing it so beautifully. One of the things that I saw you mention in a video was something that I call the bird song. And it was so beautiful. And you're going to explain, please, to us, because I remember reading in The Wisdom of the Native Americans how the chiefs described how the songs of the birds changed with the arrival of a different energy, more like a warrior energy by the settlers who couldn't really at that point understand anymore, like the American Indians did. What have you discovered about the sound of birds in relation to food, plant life, and all of that?
So bird sounds is very interesting because what happens is, so for example, the rooster, right? Every at 4 a.m. the rooster does his call, and that opens up all the plants to absorb all the dew, right? The monatomic dew that is basically all over, right? The plants start to absorb that, so they get all these beautiful nutrients that the earth is creating every single day from about 3 a.m. till 6 a.m., right? So that's the whole point of that rooster. But also with bird sounds, what bird sounds are doing is doing the exact same thing. And it's interesting because when we look at the whole 1950s DDT is good for me, right? They were telling everybody spray DDT all over your grandma, your cows, your chickens, everything. We need to eliminate. It's always the war on. We need to get rid of. And it's like, but everything exists perfectly in nature, right? It's only until you have an imbalance do you have a problem. So with the whole DDT situation, that impacted a lot of the birds. And when they took out a lot of the birds, what it did was it reduced the ability to grow food as fast or as efficient as before. Because every time the birds come around, right, their chirping sounds, their healing frequencies help the plants, right? And this was shown with two different people. You had Dan Carlson, the Sonic Bloom, where he basically went around with a little boom box and he played bird sounds and he sprayed all his plants with wine and he noticed a tremendous increase in the growth. And he went all over the country trying to show people. And in the 1970s, they thought he was absolutely crazy, but sound frequency plays a role. And we know how well, just listen to crystal bowls, listen to those tunes, listen to tuning forks, right? Listen to those things. We know how well those sounds heal the body because it's all been shown. So then you also have Dorothy Redelac, Sound of Music and Plants, in her books, where she showed that plants will actually, when broadcast with classical music, they will actually move towards the music. And when they're broadcasted with rock music, they will actually move away from the music and they will fall apart and their leaves will just instantaneously fall off. So, sound plays a very big role. So if you think about it, if you have all these birds and different types of birds, right? Because each bird is emitting a different sound frequency, what they're doing is they're boosting your plant growth. So if we get rid of birds because of all these frequencies and all of the nonsense they keep trying to put out and which are impacting our birds, right? Then we reduce our plant growth and then it makes people also more dependent on the chemicals, right? Because people can't be dependent on chemicals if everything was just working. But when you're taking away little pieces of the entire, growing food process, right? Now all of a sudden they're like, well, I have to use this, but we don't. We don't. We can use sound frequencies to heal our plants and increase plant growth. And this was all shown, but birds are just remarkable. And you'll notice too, when you do electroculture, you have more birds. You have all these beautiful birds. I had a friend message me in Australia that they got birds they've never seen, different colors, different spectrums, all these things coming around, right? Because they're picking up on this and they understand it. And the other thing too is that our birds are very confused where to go, right? In order to, let's say, come to your land because of the bombardment of the frequencies. Birds have a special little crystal inside their brain, which is called magnetite. It's a lodestone crystal, and that's in the center of their brain. And when these frequencies pulse out, it actually confuses them where to go. So if people are not having as many birds, it could be related to that topic as well, because those things are impacting them. So birds play a very vital role in gardening. And it's always why when you go outside, you hear them. They're all around. They're scavenging. They're looking at picking out the little bugs and little pests and whatever else it may be. And without them, then you're missing a vital point of when you're growing your food.
I just noticed, we talked about this, Christine and I, we talked about this yesterday, how thankful I am, that birds choose to even exist within the concrete jungle where they find a small tree and they're still there, they're still chirping. I know they're not doing it at their, highest potential. They can't because we poison them, like you said, but I'm so thankful because of like you say, it's a frequency thing. And if you listen to the concert of the birds, you yourself are experiencing just a beautiful wave of love energy. That's how it is to me every morning. There's connected to gardening and working on your land and improving everything. I also saw you talk about Cloudbusters and how they function and work. Can you talk a little bit about that? And have you had any personal experience with Cloudbusters?
Of course. So with that, there's a lot of work related to that with Wilhelm Reich and all of his work, and he did some phenomenal work on this. You can look up all of his inventions, his designs. They're all up in Maine, right? So they put them at the northern point, very far away from the people. I feel on purpose, at least in my opinion. And with this situation, he was creating all these beautiful devices with basically using different types of materials like copper, right? Like copper rods, and those copper rods would be pointed up towards the sky. And he would take, for example, a connective piece and connect that into the water, right? The running water, the primary beautiful water that's always existing. But he would connect that into a river, into a stream. And what he would notice is it would pull it was considered the DOR, or deadly orgone radiation. It would pull all of that out of the air. And what's interesting is I was looking at a document yesterday, and it was talking about how a lot of our unusual weather patterns that we've been facing, all of those things, started in about the 1950s, right? Post World War II. So if you think about it, he's doing that work at about the 1950s, and then all of a sudden he's deemed as crazy and, quackery and all those things. And I think that has a big thing to do with it. But what he noticed was it would clear up the sky, right? So whatever was up there, all this weird haze and all this stuff going on, he noticed that it would clear it up. And basically, you can build these in your backyard, right? You can take copper pipes, set them up nice and simple. You can put beeswax in there because beeswax basically goes magnetic and non-magnetic at the same time. And you can put these in your backyard. You can even put just a single pipe, right? And just kind of see what happens. And there was another fellow who was really great at this as well. His name was Trevor James Constable. And he was the one who actually got rid of all of the fog in California in the 1980s. And they did it by ship. And what happened was they had these, basically it was like two pipes, right, that would just spin the entire time. That's all they were doing. And it was just stuck on a rod, and they would drive it on the boat as they were driving, and they cleared up the entire foggy situation going on in California in the 80s. And the weathermen at that time were like, I don't know what's going on. People are all confused and whatever. But he has some great designs, and you can actually build them for your car, right, as well. So he's got all these really cool ones that you can look into. But basically, what you're doing is you're balancing the ether, right, the energy that's all around us and the atmosphere. Because what's happening is as they go up here and put this barrage of heavy metals and all types of chemicals and things up there, what they're doing is they're altering the frequencies, right, and dimming our frequencies, dimming our consciousness, and all of these things, and then obviously working to block out the sun, which the sun is life, right? Without the sun, we cannot function. But these can work as a great counter towards all of that. And for myself, I've done stuff even with just even quartz crystals and different types of stones and doing vortex motions from clockwise to counterclockwise. And it's worked remarkably. I've seen things clear up just by doing the motion. And I think that's what we don't realize is how much just even the thought, right, affects things, right? If we all think, oh, tomorrow's going to be a gloomy day, it might be a gloomy day just because of that thought process. And that's how much the mind is connected to all of this. So there was my great friend, Mitch, the orgone donor. He does some great work as well, too, with this topic as well. And he's got so much on that as well. But it's just, it's a very interesting topic when you get into it. And there are solutions with all of this stuff. That's what I've realized.
Exactly. I love that you said that there are solutions to all of the man-made problems because they're all man-made right now. It isn't like nature is providing any of these problems. It's all man-made. And one of the things we noticed some 12 years ago, I believe, we learned about a ritual called Agnihotra. And basically you take cow dung, dried cow dung, and ghee, and you burn that in a copper in a copper pyramid, so upside down, of course. You put the dry cow dung in, you put the ghee on, you burn it, you put rice into it. There's a little song that you sing with it, and it's a cleansing ritual where you can remove all harmful radiation and even clouds. We've seen that too. So there are many, many ways to go about this. And I believe they all tap into the same power, like you just said. I mean, we're just beginning to tap into it. And speaking of tapping into it, you're not just a truth speaker. You're what I love about what you do is it's actionable. You put ideas to people to say, hey, listen, try this, do this, try it for yourself, because this is what we need to do right now. As we're going through this awakening, we need to be actionable and start changing things ourselves. Did you always think like that? Did it begin with that akashic reading that you had, or how was your upbringing? How did you become so open to all these things?
I mean, I've always kind of gone against the grain, right? Like I used to get in trouble all the time in school for talking too much, which I think we can attest to that in this one right now, But I never, yeah, I guess just throughout, I've always been curious. I think that's just what it was. And even when I was in the health and fitness world, and I was, learning about things, I would just get into something and just, yeah, like nonstop, and then just go through it, and then try to read as much as I could and I was always even about that with even like fitness and supplements and vitamins, and I would sit and just read everything I could, so I think that's just part of, yeah, my, just how I am with information, because I want to know it, and then I also want to be able to then have a solution to it, right? Because I feel like if we just keep going in the same circle, right, like 1976 was the same playbook as 2020. If you keep going in the same thing, you just keep having the same thing happening over and over again. And I would rather have a solution to it than just keep doing it, right? Because if it's broken in the first place, I'd rather just fix it, address it, and then move to the next. Because as we fix, for example, just the first part of like growing our food and having abundance, then we can move to water, then we can move to energy, and we can move to those three things. And once those three are covered, we're pretty much covered on everything. There's really nothing of what. And if we relate it to the weather, right, then you can't do that either. So I kind of see it as there are solutions to everything. And when I was deep in a lot of like times, maybe in the 2015 and stuff, I was in like these dark spots, of just like all the stuff they want to put us in. And it took a long time to get out of that, because that frequency is consuming you, and I just see things so differently now, and I want to try to share as many things as I can to help bring that the positive frequency up first, and getting rid of all that fear frequency, because I know how it is to be in that, and I know how it is to have your health go bad. I know how all these different things, and so I try to at least try to put out something, or as maybe a solution to these things, so that we don't have to, so that other people don't have to go through the same thing.
I see it very similarly, and I believe it's just a part of for everyone who's on Earth right now. To a certain extent, you have to go through or into these rabbit holes, because you have to see truth, right? Otherwise, you'll always be blinded by a new version of a lie. And I think so that is important. It's part of our spiritual evolution as well. I know you also took a deep dive into the fake history. That I mean, we base so much of what we see in our reality right now on a false history, on a false historic model, right? What were some of the greatest aha moments for you when you looked into it, where you go, "Oh my God"? I mean, we were lied to about everything.
So one of the biggest ones, I remember I was reading a book from 1902, and they talked about how Mr. Stubbenfield created a device in which you could basically take, similar to an electroculture antenna, place it into the earth, take a little wire, put it up with a little speaker pod right next to your ear, and you could communicate with people across the planet using this device by just plugging into the earth. So when he created this, he basically said, we don't need anything with wires. We can just use the earth's energy, right? And this is at the same time that Marconi was creating the radio, and he actually died of a heart attack, multiple of them, from the radio. But that invention went forward while Stubbenfield's invention pretty much went away. So that was one, definitely an aha moment. And then looking into the energy, right? Like, for example, and I have a book right here, so this actually goes perfectly with this topic as well. But, just looking at, for example, the 1893 World Fair, you could look at the New York World Fair. You can look at London. You can look at all these world fairs.
St. Louis, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get into this because they all look exactly the same. They all had the exact same buildings. And what's interesting is they said that all these buildings were temporary, but a lot of the books in which I've now collected have shown that the walls used to be 18 inches thick, right? So who builds an 18-inch thick wall for a temporary building, right? And all out of granite and sandstone on top of it.
And they built what? They built one building in a day on average, or even shorter than that. It was a ridiculous number. I forgot, or even just hours. I mean, it was just unimaginable. No matter what you build it from.
And with that topic, right, if they were building that fast, how many people did they have? If the population was what we were told and the population was a lot less, how were they building so fast? Is there some advanced technique we don't know where you can just pop up a building and whatever else? So that was interesting. And then when you get into those buildings and you start seeing all these things called dynamos, and dynamos were these gigantic energy creators which would use magnets, iron, and copper. And it's interesting because what are we talking about with electroculture? Magnets, iron, and copper, right? So, it's fascinating when you get into this and you start seeing the history in which we've been told and how off it completely is. And also, too, with the pictures of the people in these timelines, you can see how off they seem, right? Like they're on a horse and a wagon next to a building that looks like the Colosseum, something it's just absolutely. And this is in every city across the planet. So then,
especially in the United States, where apparently you don't have that much history in terms of building huge structures and stuff like that. This is it's more ironic here than it is in Europe, right?
yes, because we've been told, the Romans and the Greeks and all of this other whatever nonsense and whatever. But then when you look at, for example, Chicago, like Chicago was absolutely stunning. They had a wall of granite with archways surrounding the entire city, a star fort, right? And I've started to realize they're star cities, but there were all these star forts, all these big, beautiful structures that we sit there and think, how were those made, right? And if we go by even the Industrial Revolution and all these timelines, those timelines don't even make sense because the New York World Fair in the 1850s in New York City was before everything was going on. But all the buildings look exactly the same as the 1876 Philadelphia Fair, the 1893 World Fair. Then you go to like Vienna, same exact thing. Always. But anyways, then you go to Vienna and same exact designs. Then you go to London. Then you go to Paris. Then all these places, and you sit there and think, was somebody calling somebody on the phone and telling them this is how you built it? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it was interesting, too, because when you look at these buildings as well, they had a lot of talks about how they didn't have bathrooms, right? There were no bathrooms. There was no plumbing present. So how were the people using the place? And then also, where was the food supply? That's kind of what I've been kind of trying to figure out. They had these crystal buildings with agriculture inside of them, and they had these massive places with all these different crystals and things. But where was all the food, too? And then you just have these people who are, riding around on horse and buggy, almost looking like they're trying to inhabit this buildings and this place. They don't know where they're living, and then they would kind of just sooner or later take it over. And when I was getting into the other part of these books, even just the inventions, like they were creating a lot of clocks, right? They're all about clocks and making watches. And I said and thought, if you're building all this, do you even need time? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like that's what you're creating, but this is what's next to you, and let me see if I just pull up one real quick in here. Just a perfect example, just as a picture to show of something, just so you can kind of see the level of detail. So like this is as they're saying is, the Edison invention, right? And what I noticed also too, when I got into all of these things, there's certain names and certain people who have pretty much kind of taken over what was created before, and then they would just put a name on it. And some of these things like Westinghouse, that was already inscribed onto a lot of these designs before the World Fair was created. So then the question is well, then who is that person, right? Because it's not the person you've been showing me in the book or the history we've been told. Who are those people? And where are all these words coming from and names and even like the name Tesla, right? Where did that come from? And then it gets interesting when you get into it.
It's what is quite incredible is that you don't have to pull back that many layers to see all the inconsistencies, right? It's not like this is such a deeply woven, perfectly spun conspiracy. It's very primitive actually, because you pull back the first layer, you realize it can't be. So that's not what we've been told. What we also see is when you look at these beautiful buildings that we see in the World Fair everywhere. I mean, it's just something that it elevates the spirit and the heart. I mean, they're harmoniously built. They're using sacred geometry. It's everything that makes us feel empowered, inspired, and all these things. So, whoever or whatever race or entities came in and took over these beautiful structures, they began to tear them down and replace them with these ugly, what they call modern architecture, ugly, horrific, energetically completely dead buildings, right? Lowest possible frequency. It looks like death to me. All these very sleek modern buildings. Do you think, and this of course we can only speculate, do you think that it was a replacement, that it was a change of leadership in terms of another species took over that was far less advanced or far lower in frequency?
I think there was maybe an event that maybe occurred, and then somehow everybody's just kind of gone, and maybe there's only so many people left. I mean, a lot of the stuff, yeah,
Like
like
a reset, like a
a
reset
lot of the
event.
stuff doesn't make any sense too. Like even when you said that about how the buildings were destroyed, right? A lot of them were destroyed by fires. But in the books from the 1902 and 1888, they say all the buildings are fireproof. So then it seems more
The
like
incredible fires in all big cities of the United States between the 1860s and the 1900s. It's quite incredible how all cities had a great fire.
and the crazy part is every fire was like 6 months apart or all on the same day. And it was interesting because even the Chicago one was there was a cow who kicked over a lantern and somehow the whole place went up, right? But stone doesn't burn unless you cook it at the most highest temperature, almost like a lens from above, like a Fresnel lens to actually cook it. So, I kind of see it as some event took place and then there were maybe these people left over or whoever, or maybe they caused the event, right? I don't know what it may be, like almost like a shift or something. And then as that happened, they pretty much then moved in and started putting up all their last names or, their surnames up there and then saying, well, this is what I created. Because a lot of the brands that we know today that are very, very large, right? Like General Electric, right? When you go into these World Fair pictures, they got General Electric just plastered right on there and all the signs. So it's like when these new people came in, who they kind of like shipped in. That's kind of how I see it. They shipped them in, or they breeded them. Could be as well too. But when they did all of that, then they gave them a new. This is what we're about. You got to buy electric, and you got to buy this, and what's interesting too is even all of the textbooks I've collected. The daily chores or the daily lifestyle of people in this time also don't add up to how they were living. So I feel like it had to be some sort of almost like a reset or an event, and then certain people were left over. They then took over things and then destroyed a lot, like you said, to get rid of a lot of things that don't make sense, right? Because, for example, if me and you went down to downtown Chicago and it was just remarkable buildings, you'd be sitting there thinking like, wait, where did these come from? You start asking all kinds of questions. But if only one building, such as the Capitol building, looks like that, you're like, it's just maybe that's what they built and whatever else. But if you had 10,000 of them, you'd sit there and think, who was here building this? And it defeats the whole, at least in my opinion, the Rockefeller educational system teaching the history that it's trying to teach.
Exactly. It's quite incredible also to notice how the thoughts that you have, the questions that you have, the exploration. I mean, it's such a synchronicity of many of us who have the same questions, the same thought, and it's a question of, okay, once you eliminate the falsehoods, the truths seem to reveal themselves more and more and more. So, which brings us to, and this is always the most important question: is what can we do on a daily basis in your mind? Because I believe you're as passionate as we are about not just uncovering these things, but actually creating the shift, helping create the shift so we can move back to these original ways of living that were designed for us perfectly. Like you say, nature is perfectly designed. There's nothing that we need to mess with. We just need to rediscover the principles. And for that, we don't have to cut anything open. Just observe, learn, and emulate what you see. So, what are your suggestions to the viewers? What can they do on a daily basis?
I mean, the biggest thing is, first and foremost, getting connected with nature, right? If you spend time in nature, you will see everything so differently, right? Because there is no chaos, there is peace. Your mind is at peace, right? You're balanced, right? You'll come back inside and go, this doesn't really feel that comfortable anymore. I should be out at the forest, or I should be out on a hike, or I should be out on a mountain. That I would say is number one, right? And then I would say the next part of elevating your body would be cleaning up your diet, making sure you're eating all organic, not putting pesticides into the body, because a lot of these chemicals can mess with your brain, mess with the ability for you to think. The next you can move into is finding primary water or structured water, so you can heal the body, keep the beautiful 90% water that we are, functioning, right? And then the next part of that is, I would say getting rid of Wi-Fi, hardwiring your devices so that you're not pinging this unwanted microwave frequency inside your house, which actually impacts the frontal cortex and your ability to think, right? Because that's what it's directed towards. These are mostly your emotional, this is your thought. So that is another one as well. And then getting into reading books, right? Go back in time and start getting into books and holding physical books, reading, exploring, and looking up just different topics. Whatever topic you have been told, just go look at the videos and footage from that topic. Perfect one is, the Wright brothers airplane, the first airplane that ever flew. If you look at the footage, the airplane never landed in the footage, right? So the question is then, did it ever work, right? So with little things that we have to start asking. And then as I move forward into those things, the next part is getting connected to the food that you're growing, getting connected to the soil, anything that you're getting food from, knowing where it's coming from, right? Where the transportation, if it's under LED lights, right? And then when we move into the next spectrum of cleaning up your home as well too, you have getting rid of LED lights to move to incandescence, so the mind can be at ease as well, because LED lights are constantly flickering like a strobe light, so they'll actually mess with the mind. And then on the last one of ways to heal, is barefoot grounding, connecting yourself into the earth as much as you can, so that you can. There's so much energy and so much information around us, right? Trees provide tons of information. If you just hold the tree, it's a communication. There's an energy exchange between the two. There's so much going back and forth. That's why they cut down a lot of the old big trees, right? Because there's so much information with those. But getting connected to the trees, to the nature, I say, is number one. And then the last one on there is just being aware of the materials of the clothes that you're wearing as well, because they can also play a damper on your brain. And what I've noticed is all of these things, right, in which we just mentioned, are all impacting our thought process and impacting the way for us to take something in. And as we correct these things and we switch to the more natural, like you just said, and going to the natural healing, natural frequencies, natural clothes, linen, wool, hemp, all these beautiful things, the more it just kind of just unveils itself. Because as I got into even learning about these topics, as I would get into one, the others would just, unveil themselves as I got into the rest, because I'm like, oh, this makes sense. Now it all is connected. But if I'm being blocked, from this toxic terrain, right, the entire time, then I can't elevate myself to the highest potential. And that can be happening with a lot of people. And also, if you do, or if you are told something, ask questions, ask for sources, ask where is this coming from? And then just do your research, because that's the other thing. We can be told a lot. We've been talking for about 50 minutes. I can keep, telling about things, but ask questions where the information's coming from, because that's the other part. Sometimes we will take an information, we will hear it so many times in a row that we will stop to question it. And I think that's really important, is kind of taking a step back and thinking, does that feel right? I don't know, and going with your gut instinct, right? Because that's a part that has been shut off, where people hear something and they're not using their gut to think about it. And when you start thinking about it on that instinct, you start going, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think those are all things, just simple things. And I try to keep it very simple, of ways that people can just elevate their terrain to the fullest potential.
Matt, I think outstanding wisdom plus truth is always simple. Lies are complicated. Truth is simple, and I believe you view it like we do. If you remove the falsehoods, the lies, if you remove the toxins, what you're left with is this beautiful, divinely created being that we are. We're all divinely created. And so then the potential starts to unfold itself. We don't really have to. I believe a lot of times people think we have to transform ourselves into it. And so often I say, if we remove the traumas, the toxicity, and all of that, the beautiful, shining being that you are will appear and kind of know again what to do. I want to hit on one more topic, and thank you for taking that much time. And I'll tell you how it works. Okay. So this is full honesty, full disclosure here in our household. My wife is a saint, an angel, and the most amazing human being. I'm so blessed. What she does is she's a true, she's a real woman. She's my wife, a mother to our three children. And as such, she has this nurturing, the nurturing quality deep inside of her that we men don't have quite like that. It's the mothers that have that. And so she will look after my well-being oftentimes more than I do. So I wasn't even realizing up until a few days ago that I was taking your capsules here. These are the dragon bloods, right? So I didn't even realize these were yours because she just said, try this. It's really good. But what I noticed, Matt, was I usually forget about these things, right? Because you know how it is. So you take magnesium, you take this. I found myself remembering and wanting to go and take these. So tell us a little bit about the supplements that you have here. This is Pearl. This is, as I said, the Dragon Blood. Tell us a little bit about these and what they do.
So on our website, cultivateelevate.com, we have a wide array of different types of superfoods. And I'm really big at healing certain pathways, right? What I realize is with our supplements and vitamins, we're taking things in a single form or a synthetic form, right? And those things are usually hard for the body to absorb. For example, let's say you take copper, now you need zinc, now you need this, now you need that. And then all of a sudden you have this whole collection in your closet and then you forget to take them all. So I'm really big.
It's exactly like that. Bingo. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm really big on getting things from the food source, and that's what we're about. So superfoods that provide nutrients to different pathways to heal. So dragon's blood is a very fascinating one. I got into this one because I was studying the Atlantis work, actually, and all of what Atlantis used to be. But there was this tree called the Draco tree, and it was this tree that basically, as it would grow, when they would cut it, the sap that would come out of it would look and resemble like blood. And so if you think about it, it's tree sap, just like maple syrup or turpentine, how they do from the pines as well too. But it's a tree sap, and as you would apply it on your skin, or you would consume it in a capsule form or powder form, whatever it may be, your skin would begin to heal and begin to regenerate very quickly. They showed studies where people's healing of their skin, they would heal within about 3 days compared to the control, which was about 14 days. So a tremendous increase. And they showed in South America, for example, when people used to get a wound, they didn't have a bandage or a Band-Aid at that time. They used to just put dragon's blood all over and they would heal up like that. And it was fascinating when I got into this one. It was off the charts on the antioxidant list. And I thought this was probably one of the biggest things that really showed me something different. You have the auric value of food, which is the antioxidant value of food. You have things like blueberries, which are about 10,000. You have chaga, which is 50,000, but you have dragon's blood, which is over 3 million on the auric value. So it is just going to go into the body and start repairing. And that might have been why you were kind of craving it, right? Because now that you're getting the nutrients into the body begins to want that all the time. So that's the natural healing process. So dragon's blood is a phenomenal one. Works for skin issues. I put up multiple videos of people having skin issues on their hand, on different parts of their body, and it completely healing within about 30 days, and it's absolutely remarkable. A couple other ones that we have on there. We have our Pearl powder, which Pearl I think is super, super fascinating. It heals the eyes, it heals the teeth, it heals the bones. It's phenomenal for getting a carbonated form into the body of magnesium, selenium, and calcium, also different amino acids. And what I found really interesting about this was a study that was done by a professional where they started giving Pearl powder to their patients who had cataracts. And they had about, let's say about 100 patients at that time. And after about 2 months of using pearl powder around the eyes and also consuming it, their cataracts of about 70% of those people were all completely gone. And I thought, wow, maybe that's why our eyes are just suffering, because we're not getting the nutrients that are supposed to be going in there. And pearl powder helps to replace, or not to replace, but provide those nutrients. And also, too, there's about 2% water or hydration in those pearls. And that 2% water is structured water, which is then helping to feed the eyes, because the eyes are the last place to get structured water. So they start to fail over time. So pearl is just remarkable on so many different aspects. If you have sleeping issues, restless leg syndrome, works absolutely wonderful. You take 2 capsules before you go to bed, you'll sleep like a baby. But the other thing I thought was really fascinating was related to the teeth, right? In the Mayan culture, they used to use pearls to replace people's teeth. So if they lost a tooth, they put a pearl in their mouth, and that's where the whole term pearly whites came from, right? Because they used to put pearls in people's mouth. So if you think about it, if it's the exact same, DNA as our teeth in our mouth as the pearl, then we are much more connected. And as we bring these beautiful superfoods in, they will connect with us and begin to heal. So those would be, I say, my top 2 that I always talk about. We also have some excellent Shilajit. It provides 84 of 102 minerals, great for detoxing. We have a 6 mix blend, which is to basically give 6 different mushrooms to restore cellular health. I'm really big on that because our cells need food, and need nutrients. And then our last one that I always talk about as well too is our chai product, which is a great one with black ginger, cocoa, and lion's mane. And a lot of the time our digestion is not working as well as it should, so our body slows down. And chai can work to help get that digestion flowing, getting the blood flowing, and bringing the body back into its balance. So overall, everything we do at Cultivate Elevate is just trying to basically elevate our terrain and our bodies and our plants and everything, right? Because I realize if we start at home and we take back our health, we're unstoppable. And that's what I've realized. My whole journey when I used to have health issues was because of the poisons and toxins in which I was placing into my body. Once I eliminated all of that and changed my terrain, everything went away. And I don't have anything happen at all now. But back when I was doing all of that, it was a very different story. So that's pretty much us in a nutshell in Cultivate Elevate.
I love it, Matt. Absolutely positive, inspiring, wise, just exactly what the human family needs right now. So I want to make sure that people can find you. Matt Roeske from Cultivate Elevate, the founder. Where can people find you, follow you? What are the best ways to keep up with your work?
So our website has cultivateelevate.com. We have all the information on there. We have tons of blogs, everything. I put studies, all kinds, videos. And then we're also on Instagram, Cultivate Elevate, and Cultivate Elevate 2, which is our backup page. And then we have a YouTube and a Telegram, which are both Cultivate Elevate. And our Telegram channel is pretty much just a big community of everybody talking to each other and kind of talking back and forth about ideas related to healing, related to electroculture, all different things, sharing pictures, before and afters, all kinds of different things. So I'm really big about building that community so people can communicate and then also meet people in the same city or state or country that they're living in, right? Because then they can then communicate and it creates this beautiful connection. So those would be the other 2. And then we do have a Rumble page as well, where I put up all the backup videos from YouTube up on there as well too.
Fantastic. Please follow Matt, Cultivate Elevate. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time today. Absolutely love this conversation. Uplifting, inspiring, very, very beautiful. Thank you for taking the time today, sir.
Happy to be here and happy to put it out there.
Fantastic. Inspired Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon. Would you like to get access to exclusive content as well as being part of a community of like-minded people posting, sharing, and connecting on a deeper level? Come join the Inspired community on Locals, where we share more intimately and privately and do our Coffee and Truth live streams as well as our Honey Talks show, the only Inspired show with Christine Nolan. The Inspired community is absolutely uncensored and unfiltered, a place for truth, authenticity, and freedom. Join us now at inspired.locals.com or click on a link in the video description.